Now recording. So, on the agenda for today, we're going to finish off code review. I'm going to introduce assignment 7. We will then definitely do all of git, ignore, remove, clean, and code commenting best practices. The more I go through this course, the more I'm absolutely certain that this should be located in second semester. You know? Because, and you know, it's not just because I like Kevin. I also agree with everything he says, which, you know, is probably part of the reason I like his courses. So, all right, let's get to it. Let's start with assignment 7. So guess what, guys? No video! Instead, you're writing a report. Yay and boo. So, the object of assignment 7 is to perform a code review of grades.zip using the code review checklist template, template.docx. You can, the application, by opening the grades.html file in a browser, view the application, I think. The JavaScript web application was written by a developer named Mark Zuckerberg, fictionally of course. You will act as the reviewer of this code. The template has different sections under different categories. Let's take a quick look at the template, shall we? Code style guidelines. You are given what the guidelines are, and you are expected to grade the code according to these guidelines, right? So whatever your personal preference for snake case versus camel case is, here you are checking to see that it is snake case, for example. Make sense? Very good. So, for each of these categories, there is something to find. That's important to know. You should fill out the template by replacing the text in the right column of the template with your own analysis of the code. Emphasis on your own. You should be detailed and clear in your analysis. Where possible, cite issues by line number. Try to write it in such a manner that somebody could, having read your report, just go and fix it. Right? Make sense? So, for every section in this document, the code has an issue that can be meaningfully noted and commented on. In other words, I don't want to see looks good under any of these columns. All right? There's always something. The requirements for the application that Mark implemented were as follows. Well, I think I'll leave you to read this as part of the assignment. There we go. There we go. You are also checking to make sure that the code meets these requirements. So, submission instructions is just submit the PDF. Please export to portable document format, as some of us, you know, some of us don't even have Microsoft Word installed, and one of the things that generally doesn't work very well, or somewhat consistently when converting from Microsoft to open document format is tables. That's like one of the things So if you could export as PDF, I would personally appreciate it. I expect people will probably forget though. Even though it says submit a PDF file, this is how it's being graded. Any questions?
Are we skipping assignment 6?
Did we skip assignment 6?
Yes.
Portfolio website, that doesn't seem like one we should skip.
Assignments.
It's due the same day as the assignment 7.
Oh boy, alright. I'm a little behind on my grading. Let's see here. Alright. Alright. Let's see here. You really should make a portfolio website. It's kind of strongly a thing you should do. So, I kind of want you guys to do a good job on this one. So I'm not sure I'm not sure rushing it in 1 week is like a good idea, you know? So I kind of feel like I should give you a month to work on this, you know? Do a really good job, you know? I don't want you to just do an assignment here. I want you to make a portfolio website that you would show to employers, like fully deployed and everything, right? So why don't we do this? What does it say? Today's the 3rd. Let's make this one due December 1st. That should give you a good, like, I'm not, dropping this on you. You should, I should, you guys have time to chew on the problem, right? Remember that the portfolio, like the quality of the portfolio is going to be, like your quality as a programmer will be judged by the quality of your portfolio, right? So I think it should take you more than a week to work on it, basically. So we'll have assignment 7 due by the end of this week. We'll have assignment 6 due by the end of the month. Fair enough? Yeah, okay. So, good, all right. We'll do it that way then. I know I'm playing a little fast and loose with the deadlines, but I note that not all of the class is here, so I'll post an announcement about this. So, let's go through this one then. Use GitHub Pages to create a software developer portfolio website for yourselves. If you are concerned about making a portfolio website public for a few weeks while the assignment is still being marked, you can put a disclaimer on the top of the website that all of this was created for an assignment. You can find my actual portfolio website here. This website was created temporarily for an assignment. You can put that on your website, because I'm going to try to give you some good feedback that you can actually use to improve it, all right? So this should be considered your working copy of your portfolio website, all right? This is one example of an assignment where I really strongly do want you to continue working on it after the assignment has been submitted, eh? So, your portfolio website should include the following sections: summarizing statement, education, skills, projects. If you do not have any projects you feel you can list, maybe not for today. If you don't have any projects that you feel you can list, skip the section, and I will understand what I'm grading. That this is not meant as an assignment. This is meant as your for realsies portfolio, okay? So don't fabricate any information on it, please. Your resume and contact information. Remember that this must be internet safe, right? Don't put your home address, don't put your personal phone number, right? Should be your name and a way of contacting you. Yes?
Like a business email?
A business email is good. A link to a LinkedIn profile is also a good option. Possibly a link to some other form of social media. Just not like personally identifying details from physical reality. We want to keep virtual space and meet space separated, okay? As much as possible. So, make sense? Good, good? Professionally style the portfolio website using CSS or whatever you like. You know, if you know how to use React and you like React, use React, right? Make it nice. But I'm giving you like freer reign on this than, you know, this might otherwise, you know. If you can write a perfectly nice looking website without a lick of CSS, do it, right? That's the purpose of a lot of CSS libraries. Not to mention, I don't know how many like collective hours of humanity have been lost monkeying around with CSS, you know. Right. While you may complete each of these sections in the way that you prefer, 30% of the marks are assigned for having a high-quality portfolio website. High quality could involve some combination of well-written content, well-organized content. Is it relevant? Is it interesting? Is it detailed in ways that are appropriate? Is it concise in ways that are appropriate? Well-organized. Has some effort been made to lay out and order the content in a logical way? It's a portfolio website. I should get the gist really quick, right? With an employer, you've got 5 to 10 seconds to make an impression, right? Spelling and grammar. Is that accurate and professional? You know, I don't know how many times. Like the thing that they say that like an application will be thrown out over misspelled words is still kind of true, you know? Especially when there's such a great degree of tool assistance available these days, you know? Creativity. Is it original? Does it stand out? Does it express some personality? You want to express some personality, but you still want to be professional, right? If your personality is memes, I don't think you should put them on your professional website, probably at all. I'm not like, maybe there exists a meme that would be appropriate for a portfolio website, but I've never seen one. When you're going to school for a doctorate, one of the things that they take a stick and beat out of you is making a definite statement about anything. You know, I cannot mathematically prove that there's no meme that wouldn't be good on a portfolio website, so I can't say that absolutely. But in general, I suspect the likelihood is low, right? So, has extra effort been noticeably made in places? For example, a basic list of project titles is a bare minimum, but carefully listing them in a nicely styled way is much better. You guys remember the HTML5 widgets that you guys used in JavaScript, like accordion and that kind of stuff? It should look good, it should look a little dynamic, right? Likelihood to create a good impression. Would an employer feel likely that this is a good portfolio website? This doesn't mean having many skills or strong portfolio projects. What this criteria means is strictly looking at the design of the website, will it leave a good impression? You should also probably tailor the website to the type of position that you'd like to get in industry. This is a thing that you should probably start thinking about, right? Do I consider myself more of a front-end person? In that case, bring the Flash. Right? Do I consider myself more of a back-end person? Well, in that case, it's not necessarily impressive that you know how to use a bunch of CSS libraries, but certainly the thing should be properly and well constructed, right? However you want to do it. GitHub pages must be used. If any other technology is used instead, like WordPress, I can't give you a grade for it. You gotta use GitHub pages, okay? You can, of course, use things like CSS libraries and JavaScript libraries, such as Bootstrap, jQuery, React, etc. Any questions? And we feel the timeline is okay? Yeah? Okay. I think that's, this is probably the most important assignment of the whole lot of them. By quite a margin, actually. To some extent, the grading doesn't even matter. That's how important this is, But this is what you're going to be evaluated on. Any questions? Yeah?
I'm not sure if this is part of the scope, but maybe we can talk in the next following weeks about what's professional projects, what would be good to put on exactly, like a good demonstration, I guess, of what something employable is.
I don't think we have any slide material coming up on that subject, so I'm happy to take a few minutes and have a discussion about that right now. It's a very good question. So what constitutes a professional project? Well, number one, we did have some slides previously about how school assignments are not necessarily good portfolio projects. They tend to be overly prescriptive. However, some of your more open-ended assignments, a good example is assignment 4 from JavaScript, where you made the SVG game. These types of things are excellent portfolio projects, particularly that one because it can just be played in browser. You don't have to say, and here's this large collection of C++ that I wrote that are you going to compile it? Probably not. You can just, here it is. Go play. So certainly, if you have the ability or permission, anything you've been paid to do is a good thing to list. Normally, you can link to it, even if you can't host it on your, on the portfolio domain itself, right? Always check with the person you wrote the code for first, though. But, if you're in a position where, hopefully you have at least a couple of good, interesting school assignments that you've hacked together over your time here. But if that's not the case, then you're probably in a position where you want to do one yourself, right? So doing a project that an employer is going to look at and say, hey, this person does know how to code, right? First, it has to be somewhat involved, right? You shouldn't be able to just crank it out on a weekend, right? I personally think that, if it's hosted on a public repository, which it probably should be, your commit history from that repository will be visible to anybody who takes a look at it and is interested to. And you should probably, it should indicate that you've been working on the thing for, some number of months, right? If the idea can be accomplished in a couple of hours, then it's probably not a sufficiently complex idea. That being said, something in that category is better than nothing, right? One thing that I always say is, some of you may be aware that I'm the faculty advisor for the Video Game Development Club. If you want a nice chunky project, video games have a lot of chunk to them by default. They tend to be long and complex things to develop, and I would say a good demonstration of programming skill, even if you're not looking to get into video game programming, right? Video game programming is not necessarily something you want to get into anyways, because the industry is rife with abusive employer practices and 80 and 90-hour work weeks, and it's, you might be able to work there for a while, but you probably, by the time you're in your 30s, you're probably going to be like, I'm getting old. I'm getting a little old for this, So, that being said, video games are fun and everybody loves them. I can tell you like one or two examples of. I had a student once who took a Python course with me at the university, and this person developed an app the following summer. I didn't really get like the architectural details or anything, but basically the purpose of the app was to analyze lease agreements. It was focused at students in an effort to try to get them out of leases early, which you can sometimes do if contractual language supports it, but it's the type of thing where you kind of need a certain amount of legal knowledge to do that. So basically the app was in some sense selling that legal knowledge, and this person made a fair chunk of change over the summer that app was, like this was an app that actually saw commercial release. I think this person made several $1,000s on it and got hired by a firm in Waterloo on the basis of that project almost alone. I don't believe this person was a computer science major at all. So yeah, that's a good project, right? It's definitionally a good project because it got that person a job, right? But yeah, like it's kind of like it's kind of a similar kind of thing to, well, how do I just drop myself into an open source project and start making contributions? It's like very difficult, right? You should be a user of the software before you are an editor of the software, because then you'll know what needs fixing, right? Contribution to open source projects also, being a contributor on this, that, or the other is also a thing that, you can put up there. It doesn't necessarily have to be a solo project, right? However, it takes time and energy and, concentration to, work yourself into an open source community and start making contributions that are accepted, right? I'm sure that GitHub keeps track of like how many pull requests you submit that are successful and that sort of thing, which is a thing that an employer certainly would look at if they were sort of diving into your GitHub statistics to decide if you know how to program. So it kind of has to be related to your life a bit, Another good thing is volunteer projects. This is another thing that was discussed in the previous set of slides. Maybe you know an organization, a charity, a religious organization. There are lots of these kicking around. Many of them have terrible websites, right? It's possible that you could make them a better website. It might not even take you very long. A lot of the time they're just interested in serving static content, right? And you can make a nicely designed website serving static content, get yourself a thing, It also counts as volunteer work, so that's also nice that you can put that under 2 headings, right? That's a nice one. It's kind of like, okay, here's your college student coder's equivalent of your 40 hours of community service, right? That's another good approach that you can take to getting one of these projects under your belt. But yeah, does that make sense?
I think so. For me, it was just, I tried to do a couple on my own, and it's really hard to do if the whole reason is to do a project, if that makes any sense. Like just forcing yourself to I'm doing a project for the sake of a project, and all the involved steps of fabricating all the content and the commits and making it look professional. Because that would be the purpose, to see yourself integrate into a professional environment. It's kind of hard to convince yourself to do it just from it itself, if that makes sense.
It's more, I understand perfectly what you're saying. It gets more, unless coding is the equivalent for you of knitting in the evening, which it requires a bit more, it requires more neurons to, it's work. In a way, knitting can be relaxing if you already know how to knit, but coding is almost never relaxing, right? This is why it helps to do something that involves other people, because there's always the implicit social pressure of other people's disappointment in you. It's not kind of like the disappointment I'm experiencing for not getting the grades out. There's always that kind of spurring you on, right, to get the thing done.
Yeah.
So that's why I might recommend the volunteering angle. Or open source contribution also has this a similar effect. But another thing that you might consider is your personal project should be made in it with commercial release in mind, right? Take for example the video game project. This is the one that as I hopefully explained last time, this is the one that I personally, the route I went down and resulted in me being here, as I made a pinball game, right? But I made that pinball game in the full intention of seeing it eventually released on platforms. It's up on Steam right now. It's one thing to have a million defunct or semi-defunct projects cluttering up your hard drive, as I'm sure we all have. It's quite another thing to bring one of those all the way through a commercial release. You learn things about the software development life cycle by attempting a commercial release that you can't learn otherwise. And it doesn't even have to do well, right? It does, understand that, if you release a game or an app or something and it's a flop, right? It's, in a sense, you're a complete failure because you've only ever made one app and it was a flop, right? But at the same time, it was a lot of experience, and you got a lot of good experience, and that hopefully means that the next run you take at it, it flops a little less hard. There's a saying, which I think is true. although it's kind of a businessism, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success, right? Which is to say, you require about that much experience to be able to make that one thing that finally breaks through and becomes, the commercially viable project. The question is, how do you eat for those 10 years, right? But start your 10 years today, basically. But yeah, that's, in the same way that Hollywood is absolutely stuffed to the gills with waitresses who are in Hollywood because they want to be actresses, right? In the same way, I'm sure many, many service jobs across the economy are stuffed to the gills with coders who are just waiting for their latest app project to be the one to break it through. In the same way that, you get this across many creative professions, right? Authors are the same way, musicians are the same way. So unfortunately, you guys are in the most technical creative profession that exists. So, but yeah, you kind of have to take that kind of a mindset to it. Now, fortunately, there's more work in business for people who know how to program than people who know how to recite Shakespeare. So you're in a bit of an advantageous position in that respect. But that's kind of the approach you should take to the projects. Both of my games that I have up on Steam were complete and dismal commercial failures. One of them wasn't even rated badly because it managed to find a target market in dads, people's fathers. The other one was a complete flop because it's a phone game released on Steam. Of course it flopped, right? But it's still up there, and it's still something I can point to and say, I did that, So yeah, projects. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helped a lot actually. Especially the part where you were think about it as a commercial thing, even if it's not financially successful. That does kind of help put things in perspective, how to maybe build something.
It also
there's an end goal in mind. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem with so many personal projects is it's I want to do this thing to learn Next, or I want to learn React. I'm going to do this thing, and it's yeah, no, that's good. It's good to learn the new technologies, but if you just put that last finishing, 4 weeks of work on the end of it to get it up to commercial release grade, then I don't know. Depending on your app, 4 weeks might be an underestimate, but it helps to motivate completion of the project, right? Good. All right. Any other questions regarding it? Yes.
Say that right now I'm self-employed, and I want to make projects that are beneficial to my own business. Does those projects count as part of a portfolio or a repo?
Without question. Yeah. Software you write for your own benefit is very much if it's a project that you can
Because
point to and you can say.
I created a backend style C# program
Mhm.
that collects every receipt for taxes.
Yeah, that sounds marvelous. That sounds like a marvelous portfolio
And
project.
I'm using ADO.NET for that.
Yeah, I expect to see that on yours. Yeah.
Right now,
Yes.
it's still in its infancy, and so it's flopping a little bit, but
I mean, yeah, but it's still I kind of don't want to say it doesn't have to be done to be listed, but because you shouldn't list every half done,
yeah.
oh, I downloaded Rust and I got a Hello World working, but this is what I wanted it to be, right? You shouldn't put that on your portfolio, but take for example open source projects. Are they ever done? You know? Things you're actively contributing to, that's, you know, that's unlikely to ever reach a state of completion, but nevertheless, you can brag about it, right? A lot of the problem people have with this and resumes is that, like, people, their kind of native humility gets in the way, you know? Like, being humble is a good thing, like, in general in life. This is like one of the very few parts of life where, you know, being prideful and arrogant is like, it's not exactly the thing you want. Like, you shouldn't come off arrogant in your portfolio or your resume, but you should certainly, like, it's not even necessarily about upselling yourself, although this is kind of the way that business people usually phrase it. Like, just simply and factually state what it is you do, right? Simply and factually state what you do, what your interests are, what your experience is. And, you know, basically, like, if you have to resort to, like, marketing language, you've probably already lost, right? What it's about is, like, clearly and purely communicating your qualifications, what you do, and, you know, like, trusting fate that someone who likes your qualifications will, you know, hire you, basically. Because, you know, marketing speak and, like, upselling, these are all just complicated forms of lying, basically. I mean, you know, you probably wouldn't hear a business major talk about it this way, but it's true. Like, you're bending the truth in order to make things appear more desirable than they would otherwise appear. This is, generally speaking, what lying is. But you don't have to lie to get a job, right? What you have to do is work at the field, right? You have to understand what the ladder is you're climbing, put your effort into climbing it, and, like, hopefully in, you know, maybe it takes you 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. It depends on the conditions in the market of the job market. But, you know, like, I didn't start off as a professor, right? I started off as a TA, and because I was a good TA, I got part-time work in, you know, you want to know what my first instructional position was where I wasn't a TA? I was teaching goddamn tech writing. That course here. Now, that course is awful to teach. Like, you have to mark essays. And essays are even worse than videos for marking. Honestly, it's like they're just... Imagine being confronted with, like, 30-odd essays, and they're all 2,000 words apiece, and everybody's expecting you to actually intelligently comment on, you know, what they wrote, and you're, like, trying very, very hard not to fall into the heuristic, well, if they wrote more, that must be better, right? You're trying so hard to read it, but, you know, after you're through this third one, your eyes start to glaze over, you know? It's like, it's difficult work. And that's the reason that, you know, generally speaking, people who are established in the profession avoid courses like that like the plague, right? Don't give me that course, whatever you do, right? And, you know, but I did it. I slogged it out in that course for like 2 years-ish. I was able to pull enough decent course evaluations from students that I was able to step to the next rung of my particular ladder which was teaching a course as a sessional instructor at the university. And I was now teaching actual honest-to-goodness programming. I was teaching introductory Python. And, you know, stepping from tech writing to intro Python, that's a good step to make. From there, I was able to step into increasingly complex courses, sort of traveling up into even, I made it as high as the third year. Normally, past that point, courses are reserved for like veteran and established professors at the university, right? Quite a rare thing for a sessional to be given a third semester or a third year course, unless it's a notoriously bad course, which it was in my case, which nobody wants, right? So there I am, right? Finally, I managed to get graduated from my bloody PhD. I finally have the qualification, and once I get graduated, I apply here, and I'm like, I got the doctorate now. I've got, you know, I've been teaching essentially the equivalent of full-time hours, actually more than that, in part-time positions. And I'm looking for work, you know, and they were like, yeah, okay, we'll take you on. And I've been working here ever since. At the time, actually, I was also in talks with McMaster to be brought on as a part-time, or as a full-time but contractually limited instructor. So it would have been like a year or two, and then they'd either let me go or renew the contract type deal. But here it's full-time permanent, and I'm like, well, it might be less money, but it's also a lot more stability, and I have a family with young children, so this is where I'm going to be. So that was like, but you see, like, it took me about 10 years of teaching to get this job that I'm currently in. And like the question, well, how did I manage to put bread on the table in all of that time was, you know, basically I was able to hang out in grad school, right? And I was making money with other teaching gigs, right? So not a lot, but enough to keep bread on the table. So and you know, I might be biased, but this is kind of my view of employment generally now, is like, you've got to be willing to do the work nobody wants to do, right? You've got to be willing to tough it out and slog it out at the exact bottom of the ladder. It is only the people who make it through the bottom of the ladder who are permitted to rise to the upper rungs of the ladder, right? Like, you have to prove yourself doing the really terrible work before you are permitted to, you know, before you are considered a person who, and some of it is also just age as well, but, you know, so it goes. I think that's all I have to say on the subject.
No, that was good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Good. Code review. I will try to stop being a motivational speaker now. Oh man, if there's one thing I can't stand more than anything else in the world, it's motivational speakers. It's like, if I like my level of motivation where it is, thank you very much. I don't need to be externally managed in terms of motivation, thank you very much. So, so I think we'll start right about here. How are code reviews conducted? There is a fair bit of variation from organization to organization about how reviews are conducted. However, there are a few general patterns. For example, over-the-shoulder code reviews. When a developer is done their work, they find someone in the office to review their code. The developer is present during the review and may offer explanations to the reviewer as to why they did things the way they did. So basically, and like over the shoulder here does not refer to the person reviewing the code. You, the developer, are looking over their shoulder. If someone is being polite enough to review your code, you should at least offer them the seat, right? Yes, so basically, the senior dev or something is like, well, why did you do this? And you're like, well, I did it for this reason. And they're like, well, you could have done it that way. And you're like, oh, I didn't think of that. And that's how over the shoulder works. This is very lightweight and effective, but informal and potentially subjective / prone to missing things. Ideally, it's done by someone who's not a friend of yours, right? Someone who's going to give your code a more objective view, right? Preferably someone in the testing department. Email threads. Email threads are the worst way to communicate. Email is the worst way to communicate. Letters are preferable. I'm kidding. After a developer has done their work, they email their colleagues to review the work. The branch in the repository might also be provided. Here's a link to the source code. Again, this process is very lightweight. If your company supports email, they support this process. This has the advantage of having a written record of thought processes and arguments. This can occasionally be useful, particularly in cases of strong disagreements. In a similar way, chat tools such as Slack and Discord can be used for code reviews, and a number of other things as well. There are also tool-assisted code reviews. Do you guys remember, like at the end of class last time I showed you CPP check? Did I show you guys that one? Here, we'll see it again.
While we're researching the dates for assignment 6 and 7 are weird. Assignment 7 was supposed to come yesterday.
Oh, is it still not fixed?
And the 6 is like by December 1st. So.
Oh, maybe I goofed it and put them in the wrong. Okay, assignment 6, portfolio website. I do intend that to be due December 1st. Because I want you guys to have a month to work on it, because I want a good one, and I want it to be to the grade where you will use it to try to get a job. For assignment 7, what is this? November 9th.
That's available.
Oh, that's available in, oh. Yes. I hate Canvas. It's literally the worst. There, we'll make that the 9th. Sound good? Okay.
That's the last one, right?
That's 7. Yeah. Please have the code review done for Sunday. The portfolio website, I'm going to give you more time because I want good ones. Okay? So, this is not it. Switch from CPP check. They tricked me. Sponsored results. CPP check, a tool for static analysis of C, C++ code. So, static analysis means that it's an engine which is parsing but not compiling the code. So basically, you can think of this as an add-on for your compiler's type checker / syntax error checker. However, it's looking for more specific problems. These sorts of undefined behaviors, information leaks, access control problems, input validation, checking that your comments and other sorts of things are compliant with standards. A lot of this, you don't necessarily need a person to look at it, right? Like, in theory, you can write a program to check to make sure all of your identifiers are snake case, right? It is possible to do that with a program. And being programmers, it is perhaps not surprising that people have done so, right? It's kind of just a matter of understanding that these tools exist, right? Static analysis engines for most I would venture to say all major languages are out there somewhere. You just need to find them. I kind of wish we talked more about them, actually, because they're very useful. There's one that will check to see if your Java code is compliant with JavaDoc, right? Recently, when I teach Java, I run students' work through this, and I give them their list of JavaDoc errors. And very occasionally, someone actually manages to submit something that doesn't have any at all. So, some consider pair programming, where two developers write a solution together, to be a form of code review. Others consider it strictly a development practice. Maybe you're reviewing at the same time you're developing. Maybe it's two developers developing together. It's kind of just a matter of it's just semantics, you know? Checklists and templates. This should seem a little bit like a particular assignment you guys are going to be writing. A code review document containing a checklist or different sections. A code review document containing a checklist or different sections may be used. Comments, spacing, security, etc. The code reviewer will fill out the template for a piece of code being reviewed, leaving comments and feedback where appropriate. This is, as we go forward here, our code review methods are picking up more and more formality, right? This is the most formal one we've talked about so far. I mean, it's literally on a form, right? Formal code inspections, though. A group of developers may review code together. Code may be on a screen or shared in an online meeting. Developers will walk through a formal process together, much like a checklist, to check for coding standards. So, under formal code inspections, there is a procedure that they are following for the inspection. They check this, then they check this, then they check this. It's related to this one, but more rigorously defined. Make sense? Here is an example of a code review checklist. Number 1, does this code change what it's supposed to do? Can this solution be simplified? Does this change add unwanted compile time or runtime dependencies? Was a framework API library service used that should not be? For example, a lot of people are sort of moving away from jQuery dependencies, right? Was a framework API library not used that could improve the situation? Are you programming in Node.js and not using Express, for example? Is the code at the right abstraction level? Have you been addressing problems, inside classes where they should be inside classes, inside functions where they should be inside functions? Is the code modular enough? How long are those functions? Would you have solved the problem in a different way that is substantially better in terms of maintainability, readability, performance, and security? That's a question for the reviewer. Could you do better? Would you have done better with this? Does similar functionality already exist in the code base? Are there any best practices, design patterns, or language-specific patterns, etc., etc., etc.? It cuts off. Here's another slightly longer one, which I'm not going to read to you. There are checklists, things to check. Any questions about code review? Reading other people's code is awful. Reading your own code can occasionally be worse. At least with other people's code, you're like, well, this person's an idiot. With your own code, it's like, wait, I'm the idiot. just because it's kind of like more thematically linked, I'd like to move to code commenting, and then we'll talk about git ignore. Git ignore isn't that difficult. This is kind of a lighter week. You may have got that impression because we're talking about commenting. So, commenting is still important though. So, code commenting best practices. We are going to see over the course of these 11 slides why the accursed chat algorithm is not as good as it thinks it is with respect to code commenting. As with most things, it's a bit verbose. So, code commenting best practices. Although, before I get into this, I'd like to ask a question. Like, how much are you already given in terms of like commenting practice? What do they tell you to do? This would be occurring in the Python class, wouldn't it?
From what I remember, they says like we can comment codes, but like don't like go like too much into detail, so like don't write too much of a commenting.
Okay.
So like make it short as possible, but not like so the other person can understand what that part of the code is.
Okay.
It's like sprinkled throughout the program as like something implicitly that slowly gets introduced. The most, I think, in-depth commenting practice that we were expected to uphold, at least in my stream, was when we took like Java 1 and 2, there's a very specific way you have to document functions with like, this is a variable, this is the return, what's happening here, and we had to follow that exactly, but they never went into depth of like, why, or like what you should be putting there, and sometimes they'll leave notes saying like, this was too wordy, and they won't say why, or like, this was too short, and they won't say why either.
Yeah.
That's about the extent I felt personally.
I mean, this is once again this really nasty heuristic that people grading things often use when it comes to like judging whether commenting is good. It's like, well, I'm expecting about this ratio to be comments, and if you're too far outside on either side, I'm going to do a point deduction, and that's
You had to kind of judge it based on the professor you had, was
Yeah.
my experience, yeah. Like
Yeah.
what they thought was, that some professors, they don't even want comments, they think it makes it look messy. And some professors say, if it doesn't have like a paragraph on the top of a function, I'm gonna assume you either copy it from the internet or use like a chatbot or something. You know what I mean? It depends on the person, I felt more often than not. There was no standard I was given.
Okay. You had a comment and you have a comment.
For me, when I started Java in the summer, the first half, the professor says use clean variables so that for clarity. And then the second half, the other professors like make the variables shorter and stuff like that. And then C#, the professor would just keep things. He wants short comments, short everything, the variables as well, but everything camel case. Then when I had to take it again for C#, they kind of stole the professor. Full detail on everything. Clean variables. He says make the comments readable, make the variables cleaner, show clean code, and I had a blast. So I see differences.
Yes. Let me. This might be a little bit of inside baseball, but I've been teaching here for a couple of years now, and I don't think like not once have I been handed like a code review checklist that's supposed to be used for grading. Like it's generally you're the professional, so you grade the student, according to the way that you think it is, like how good you think it is, I guess. Yes.
He was saying that some professors do mark the code or comments. I know Dave Gilbert is one of those professors where if you don't comment, he will take marks off of your assignment for not leaving comments on how every single method or function, every single variable.
Oh yes, he has a highly meticulous personality, Dave Gilbert, which I appreciate when working with him. Actually, he's like the only prof I've ever actually gotten to like constructively use Git to try to collaborate on like the construction of a midterm. You know, like, yeah, Yoda.
I don't remember which professor it was, but I think at one point I complained. I was like, hey, I don't really get like your commenting convention. And I think he pointed me to read a clean code. And I didn't read the whole book, but I skimmed through it. And I used the principles there of like good variable names, you know, things descriptive, and suddenly everything's great. I brought that knowledge to my group, and it was like sacred text now. And then suddenly their grades went up.
Yeah.
It was just kind of funny.
And the book is called Clean Code.
Yeah, like I think it's like the first thing that pops up. You just like type it in. Yeah.
I might be having a little chat with Amazon later. So in general, this is all very interesting to know. Hopefully I can sell you on the perspective of these slides. So comments are ultimately a form of technical writing. I've been sort of arguing for some time that the tech writing course should be more tech and less writing. And this is one of the ways that I think that should be the case. Like, if not there, where else? Sprinkled about, that's where, right? So, the mind that you bring to writing comments should be the same mind that you bring to any form of technical writing. You are attempting to convey information as simply and efficiently as possible, while trying to minimize things like subjectivity, right? So, this set of slides basically is kind of a big do's and don'ts list. So, here are some do's. Use clear and concise language. Any developer with a reasonable, relevant background knowledge, including yourself, should be able to understand your comments. If you are a persona with a penchant for loquacity and verbosity, perhaps leave those $10 words at the door, right? You want to write clearly and simply in clear and simple language. That way people will understand you when you talk, right? Just because you're using small words does not mean you are unintelligent. A lot of people who think that they are intelligent mistake using large words for intelligence. When in doubt, assume developers know a little bit less than you do rather than more. So this is a good rule, not because you are placing yourself in the position of superior knowledge. It is a good rule because you yourself know less than you think you do. Comment the why and not the what. This is a very, very important one, and one that, the chatbot starts looming and rearing its ugly head for, right? How does the chatbot comment? It comments as if it's explaining the code to you, right? Though that style of comment is appropriate from the textbook tutorials that the thing was trained on. If you're trying to teach someone how code works, you comment in a style similar to how the chatbot does it. But if you're trying to comment functionally for other people working on a project, you are not trying to explain to them how the programming language works. You should assume whoever is reading your code has enough knowledge to be able to read the code itself, right? if they know what a source code file is, they know enough to open it, and they know enough to find the part of it that they're interested in reading, they probably have enough knowledge to read what an if statement is, and what the purpose of a for loop is, and the difference between a for loop and a for each loop, right? These are things that are not necessary for you to comment on, right? The code should be written clearly enough. You should use descriptive variable names, right? The code itself should be expressive and readable, aside from the comments. So what is the comment for then, if we're not explaining what the actual code is actually saying? This is a traditional mistake that people make in Java, by the way. You are explaining why the code, not what the code. Why did you make the decision to do it this way versus that way, right? Why? Well, there are a couple of whats that you should address though, like what does this function do, right? That's not obvious from reading the line of the function, and it can be sufficiently complicated that you don't, if the function's like, 100 lines of code, you don't want them to have to read 100 lines of code to get the gist of what the function does, right? But if you're talking about inline commenting, right, don't explain what the code is doing, explain why, and only in cases where, a specific decision was made. If your code is straightforward and clear, and it does only straightforward, clear things, you may not need inline commenting at all. Does this make sense? Any questions? Okay. Update comments regularly. Many people, some of you who have experience with programming projects will have experienced this, but if you're kind of more new to coding, you probably haven't had the experience of taking a piece of source code that was written like months to years ago and fixing it, take this out, put that in, fix this up, right? A lot of the time when people are updating and improving code, they forget to update the comments as well, right? Which means that you end up in a state where your comment is a comment on code that no longer exists, which means that it's not even just it's actually worse than having no comment at all because it's actively misleading, right? Use inline comments sparingly. This is another piece of advice that the accursed chat algorithm might take into account. The chat algorithm comments every 3 lines or so, right? With a single line comment like, this is what these 3 lines of code are doing, right? The overwhelming majority of those are completely unnecessary. When you take a piece of code and you put it into the accursed algorithm and you say, comment this for me please, it's not commenting it like you would. It's commenting it like it's an example in a textbook. Because it's been trained on textbooks, right? So, and it's been trained to think that textbooks are the way that you should do everything. Textbooks are not the way that you should do everything. Textbooks are a way to learn things. So, inline comments, and by this we mean any comments which are written in the middle of a function, right? We're not talking about in the middle of a mathematical expression, drop a function in there. You should never do that, right? If we're using a lot of inline comments, we're probably explaining what and not why, right? Comments at the top of function blocks explaining why something is done are better. Inline comments should ideally be clarifying particularly confusing aspects. So, yeah, we're going to see an example of this coming up. So, header comments for sections. Section, it's a term that's being used for a lot of different things, right? When we say section in Java, we mean class, right? When we say section in JavaScript, we probably mean the file. When we say section in PHP, we definitely mean the file, right? Header comments for sections. It's not just a matter of putting the statement of authorship in there. By the way, dead giveaway that your thing was an assignment. Using header comments at the tops of files, class definitions, functions, or sometimes control structures. Header comments should provide an overview, again focusing on why and not what. Commenting tricky or non-intuitive code. When code is complex and has a non-obvious purpose or uses rare syntax, functions, etc., it's good to explain why you wrote it like that and also how it works. Logic, potential pitfalls. Here's a good example for you. I'm sure we've all been here. Let's imagine you are writing code and you're experiencing a bug, and it's a strange one, and the only way you can get it so that bug doesn't happen is like you reorganize the code in a way that's like, you know, kind of particular. And the only reason it's organized that way is because if you do it the other way, there's a bug. That is a perfect example of a place where you should comment to say why you did it that way. You should also leave a description of the bug that happens if you don't do it that way. Right? Now, maybe someone else working on the project will know why that bug is actually happening and be able to fix it so that the good way of doing things works. But they won't know that if you don't leave the comment in about the bug, that you did that because of a bug, right? It's information about how the decisions that went into how the program was written. Does this make sense? Very good. Of course, if you find yourself having to comment a section of code because the way you've written it is weird or tricky, your first line of defense is always like, maybe it could be rephrased so that it was better, you know? Maybe the weird, tricky code you're using, there's a better, less tricky, less weird way of doing it. Maybe you should do it that way instead. And then you wouldn't have to worry about commenting it. Many such cases in PHP, right? There's an interesting trade-off that people a trap that people fall into, particularly people kind of in the like intermediate programming skill category. I remember back when I was doing martial arts, the person who was training me said that there are 3 beginners and there are 3 experts, but there are 10,000 novices, right? Or 10,000 acolytes. And the idea is like, when you have somebody who knows nothing about coding, everybody kind of codes kind of similar because they're all in the same boat, right? As you gain skill, you know, the way that you code becomes differentiated, right? Everybody goes through a phase of like over relying on if statements, right? Some people may still be in that phase, right? I'm sorry if that was if anybody in the room considered that a personal attack. But you know, there's a style of coder who has like fully and truly absorbed the if statement and the loop, but has not quite gotten to the level of absorbing the function or like modularizing code at that level, right? That is a category of person. But like once you know a little bit, paths diverge, right? So one of the ways that one of these paths right, from beginner to expert, is along the path of code minimization, right? Some people become very strongly obsessed with trying to express the program in as few lines of code as possible, right? And there are decently good reasons to do this, right? For one thing, it's kind of true that like the amount of lines of code you have is kind of the surface area that bugs can live on. So if your program is short, there's just less space for bugs in it, right? It's kind of like it's a little weird to think, but like if you think about it this way, right? Are you more likely to make a typo typing out 20 lines of code or 200 lines of code, right? That kind of effect. So, it's not a bad idea to learn how to write hyper-compact code. You also learn quite a bit about how a programming language works by learning the mechanisms you can use to express as much as possible in as little as possible, right? However, there's a line there, and that line is putting an assignment statement inside of an if statement predicate, right? You shouldn't do assignment inside of if statement guards, the Boolean expression. Don't ever do that. If you've done that, you've gone too far, all right? And I'm talking to you PHP programmers. Like, there is a strong, culture in programmers of making use of, kind of sideways mechanics, I guess you could say. You're kind of making use of obscure little rules and obscure little ways that the programming language works, and using that to do code functionality, and that's bad and wrong. It's gone too far, right? Even if it's more lines of code, it is preferable to write clear code to writing highly abstruse code, right? Because in some sense, it doesn't matter if you write a program and then write the same program on 3 lines of code instead of 20, it's all being compiled down to the same machine code, right? It's you're often not even getting speed benefit out of doing that, right? All you're doing is kind of being a smart ass, right? So you shouldn't be a smart ass when you're writing your code. If you want to know how to write code more efficiently, take the data structures and algorithms course. Learn algorithms. That will help you write efficient code. The idea that writing a short algorithm equals more efficient code, it's like that heuristic where smart people think that saying longer words makes you smart. It doesn't, right? Writing a short program doesn't make it efficient, right? So a thing I've never really fallen into this trap because I've always never really been a very good programmer. But when I write my examples on a slide in class, I'm always careful to try to not use things like ternary statements. If I'm doing a check, PHP is an awful example, you guys all took the PHP course. You guys all know that the first 2 weeks of that is and here's the litany of terrible programming practices in PHP that you must know if you're going to read PHP programs. Should you do this? Absolutely not. In recent semesters, I've come to call this the list of cursed PHP, right? So don't write cursed code, all right? It's much better to write longer code that is logical and makes sense according to regular rules than to throw in all of these weird things that allow you to do strange things like compact the code down to 3 lines. All right, okay? All right. All right, this one's kind of easy. If you're doing a comment block, like use the comment block characters, right? Now, it's tricky because a lot of the time the editors will drop these in for you if you use like the block comment, you know, in the right-click menu, you'll end up with like a whole bunch of these. A good editor should be you should be able to configure it so that it doesn't do that. You might just be using a very basic editor. Does VI do that?
Does it do what, sorry?
If you like select a bunch of code and you ask it to comment it, does it do this or does it do that?
I don't have a command for that in my Vim.
Okay.
Usually what I do is I do control V, go visual mode, and then shift insert. Once we insert on multiple lines, and then I can do //.
Okay. Oh, okay, so you've basically like kind of reconstructed this method using commands. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can jump to the top and bottom of functions, and so you can do the block style comments as well. I don't do that.
Yeah. I was just curious. It seems like the sort of thing that VI would have in there somewhere, you know? Or Vim. So yeah, I mean it makes sense, right? If you're commenting a block, use block comments. Follow a consistent style. Using a consistent style across your source code improves readability. It also makes it look more professional. If you're showing off your source code to employers, it should look professionally commented. Function headers should contain the same information in all cases. For example, like going back to Java, it's useful to document what the expected inputs are. It's useful to document what the return value is. If you have no other information about a function, you should at least have that, right? All right, now for the don'ts. Don't state the obvious. Do not write comments that just redundantly describe what the code does. X equals 5. Assign 5 to X. Don't do that. Calling function add and passing it X and Y. Like you're not writing COBOL, all right? Don't comment like that. Minimize excessive comments. Don't clutter the code with so many comments that the code becomes difficult to read. This is why header comments are normally preferable. I think I mentioned this previously, but like one type of comment I'd like to encourage people to use, and particularly in languages with like function blocks that tend to be like longer than one page, is writing the name of the function at the end of the function, right? So it's like a few sort of rare languages have this as like a built-in part of the syntax, but it's like, you know, function x dot 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 dot. Imagine that's like long, literally infinity lines of code. And then at the end function x. This can be very useful to you if you are not working in a coding environment that does code folding. Most of them do code folding at this point, but this is kind of a way of getting around the lack of code folding. This way, you always know what this like imagine your screen is like this, right? You know what this function was if this is here, right? Make sense? And hopefully it's not so long that you have to do that in the middle too. If that's the case, you probably need to reconsider your modularization. So let's consider this piece of code. This is poorly commented. How is this poorly commented? Anybody?
It's explaining everything. It's almost like writing it twice, but in plain text and in code.
Exactly. It's right. It is. It's writing it twice in plain text and code. If you count the number of characters going on here, I think you have more comment than code, right? For item in items, loop through the items in the list of items. Like, yes. In other words, for item in items, anybody who knows any degree of Python whatsoever should be able to know that, right? Better comments, right? Have you guys ever seen a doc string in Python before? You open it with 3 quotes. If you place the 3 quotes on the next line under a function definition, this actually binds this string as like the documentation string for that function. You can access this documentation string by either using underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. The other way that you can get that is by just calling help and providing the function name. It'll show the doc string in Python at least. So what do we have here? We have a description of the function, calculates the total price of a list of items. We have the list of arguments described. It only takes the one items list right there. You'll note Python does not include typing annotations. You can annotate typing in Python now, but you're not required to, right? This is still valid Python code. Doesn't have to have type annotations. So, stating the expected type in the documentation where that's not stated in the language itself, you are adding value, right? You are adding value over what can be read from the source code. A list of items where each item is a dictionary with name and price keys. That is extremely useful information. All you have to do is read this, and you know, well, I know why my list didn't work, right? It wasn't a list of dictionaries. I was just providing a list of numbers, and I thought that would work. These are the types of problems that people have in languages like Python. This is not the sort of problem that you have in good languages like Java. Oh man, I'm feeling like my Python hatred just kind of, rising as we discuss these slides. Oh, it's great. It's very nostalgic for me. I used to be famous as the professor who taught Python and hated every moment of it. That was like my shtick when I was at the university. It's a good shtick. It's good for keeping the troops motivated. Returns a float, the total price of all items. Yes, indeed. Again, the return type of the function is noted. Python can be a real pain in the keister to use because it's not obvious what the types of anything is. And it doesn't help you at all. It just attempts to work anyways, right? Although it's not as bad as JavaScript. Python actually uses a type system called existential typing. So what that means is, for any particular variable or thing that has a type, it maintains a set of the valid types it could have based on the operations that have been performed on it, and it only gives you a type error if that set no longer has any members in it. So, like, if you have a variable and you perform an arithmetic operation on it like modulo, it's like, oh, well, you know, it must be an int or a float or something like that. Well, I'm not going to select which, it's one of these, right? And then if you then take it and you do like a string operation on it, like, you know, I don't know, like a string operation. And it's like, well, I have to eliminate everything from the set of things it could be that isn't compatible with this string operation. I don't have anything left in that set, so there's a contradiction. That's a type error. That's how Python considers types. Java just checks everything ahead of time, right? JavaScript, I often say that in JavaScript there's only one type, and that type is garbage. I'm pretty sure how it works in JavaScript is like everything's like annotated with a string telling you what type it's supposed to be, but like it doesn't like actually boil down to like the actual value. But I'd have to read more about JavaScript to confirm that. So I would like to call your attention to the only inline comment that remains. Note with .2 price is output with 2 decimal places of precision. So if you're not familiar with how a format string works in Python, that's helpful, right? You would expect most Python programmers to be familiar with that, but you know, so it goes. Yes. I think I already talked about all of this. Yes. The convention this string follows for parameters and return values is one that Google follows. This is a convention that Google uses, which is good because it's good. I'd just like to point out, you know, it's probably a feather in Google's cap that like in the last month, AWS was down, Azure was down. As far as I know, Google hasn't had similar problems just yet. But I would have always pegged them as being the superior programmers anyways, you know. It's kind of just the culture, right? Anyway, so any questions or comments about comments? No comments? Do we have comments about comments? No? Well, in that case, I think we'll have our break in the middle of the class. Please be ready to resume class at 5:36, and we'll get underway. Thank you very much. So, Git repository housekeeping. Ignore, remove, and clean. Of the three of these, ignore is very much the most interesting one. Remove is just, did you know that you can git rm as well as git add, right? You can remove things through git as well as like just using rm and committing the changes from doing that. You can do it directly, you know. Clean is just removing all of the files that are untracked in various different ways. But yeah, probably partially what's meant by having a nice, clean Git repo is this. So, let us consider the problem. What goes in a repository? Certainly source code files, if nothing else, source code files. But how about configuration files for your application? How about log files? What about libraries the project is dependent on? What about executables? What about IDE or editor configurations? there are a lot of files in a project that are not the source code files. Think of all of the, detritus that exists in your average IntelliJ Java project. There's a whole complicated folder structure of nonsense in there. And all that's really important is the Java source code files, right? Now, you'll want to keep a certain amount of this structure, right? But how much of it do you keep? How much of it do you let go? At the moment, we're doing everything manually. So, in general, here's the hint. None of this stuff. None of this stuff is stuff that we should keep in a Git repo. We don't generally want to include libraries our program depends on. So this is for reasons of things getting out of date, right? Let's imagine that, your web application uses jQuery, right? And you're like, oh, well, have you guys ever used jQuery? You know how jQuery works? All right, so it's kind of silly, but this is the actual way that most people get jQuery. jQuery. Right? You go to jQuery, you download jQuery. Oh, look, there it is. That's jQuery. This is called a minimized JavaScript source code file. So when I was talking about minimizing code can sometimes make it look a little unreadable, right? This is like basically a lot of very complicated JavaScript with all of the spaces taken out, right? The intent with this file was to cram it down into as few characters as humanly possible so that it can be transmitted over a network as easily as possible, right? But this is how jQuery works. You take this thing, you copy it, you paste it into a file, and you import it like it's a regular JavaScript file. So there's no CDN. Well, there's probably a CDN, but this is still like the majority way that jQuery gets done, right? So, let me ask you a question. When they update jQuery, does your file that you dropped on your computer get updated? No, right? When jQuery gets updated, you have to go grab the update. Do we like grabbing updates manually? No. This is part of the reason everybody hates jQuery. Same thing with your source code, right? If you are taking someone else's library and you're integrating it, if you just take their source code and drop it in, when they update their source code, you don't get updates. This is suboptimal. Minimally, anybody who's using your code should be able to go get the dependencies. Or, even better, you have a system in place that goes and gets the dependencies for them. Right? Good. You guys know what dependencies are, right? Hopefully everybody's familiar with the term? Okay. Good. If you're not, there's no shame. I'm here to teach you. That's what I do for a living. Right. Yes. A dependency is a piece of software that your software requires in order to run. When we, one of the first things we did with Bash is we explored apt, right? Apt is a program which manages dependencies. That's like its primary purpose. Well, yeah, I'd even say it's its primary purpose. Its primary purpose is to manage dependencies. Its secondary purpose is to be a portal through which you can download software, right? So the dependencies for any particular piece of software can become very long and complicated, right? Like you saw how much you get when you try to install even something like, SuperTux, right? Those are all libraries that are having to be added to your list of libraries that your system has installed. Now, if you update TuxCart or SuperTux, or I'm assuming that you use apt primarily to get Tux-based video games. If you update any of these programs, right, it's very likely there are updates to its dependencies as well. But versions of software will often require like specific versions of dependencies, right? This is something that you get into when you start, you start looking at like dependency importing in languages like Rust, right? It's like, I want a version of this library that's after 7.3.7, right? Otherwise it breaks. You try to be a little loose with it because other libraries may have, this dependence, like dependencies can also have dependencies, right? So like this thing, these two dependencies might depend on this one library. This one wants 7.3.7. This one wants 7.4.6, right? Those are two different versions unless you're willing to duplicate the library, which you should not do, right? What you end up, you have a dependency conflict that can't be resolved and you have to figure out something else to do. Whereas if you say, oh, any version of, any version of Python past, 3.2 is fine, then, you have a range of allowable values, which means you can potentially resolve dependency conflicts much more easily, because as long as they have overlapping ranges, you're fine. Does that make sense? Much of this is thankfully handled for us by programs like apt and Flatpak and indeed Docker. So, dependencies. Yes. One of the ways that Node.js works is that it has a file called package.json, which you modify and tell it what dependencies you want for your Node application. For example, Express, which is the one everybody wants because it makes everything easy. When I rewrite server-side for Node, that's going to be like my new catchphrase. Aside from never trust the client, it's just use Express. So, we would include the package.json file in the repository, but not the Node modules folder and its contents. So, certainly, we leave configuration files in the repo telling us what dependencies are necessary. Abso-friggin-lutely, right? Don't make your user figure out which dependencies they need to run the program. But the code for the dependencies themselves, Node, when you fire it up, goes and fetches them. So you don't have to, nor should you, include them. Generally speaking, anything that's generated or fetched should not go in the repo. So, application configuration files might include sensitive data, like security keys, but you may include a sample configuration file with sensitive data stripped out, perhaps with comments on how to use that config file. Consider the following situation. You have a configuration file that includes, for example, your database password, right? Let's say you do git add dot, git commit m, made some minor change, git push. Your database password is now publicly on GitHub. Congratulations, you've been hacked, right? So we need a way to distinguish between the files that are being kept and tracked and the ones that are not, right? Sometimes even for security reasons. Yes, as a rule of thumb, we don't put generatable things in a repository. If it can be produced from source code or from other files, don't include it. Executables can be generated from our source code, and we basically never want to include those in a repository. For one thing, they can be large, like in terms of file size. For another thing, like executables, are often like sometimes they're compiled for your specific architecture. Like a pre-compiled binary is like a particular thing, right? And maybe you want that on a releases page, but you shouldn't just drop the executable file in there, you know? Log files. Another great thing not to include. Log files are produced by running your program. They are specific to your run of the program. Why do people who are downloading your repo need to know details about your running the program on your machine? In fact, you may also be leaking sensitive data in your log files because they are specific to your machine, right? Log files are definitely out. Configuration files for IDEs and editors generally don't go in the repository. It's a little bit presumptuous. It's like, well guys, here's my code and here's the way I configure my IDE. I'm sure you'll appreciate this, you know. People like to have their own IDE configuration, you know. They're probably not even using the IDE that you're using, right? Sometimes these are kept in so that everybody can use a standard setup. However, this would be certainly more common in a corporate environment, right? This is the way we set up the editor here, young one, young whippersnapper. If you don't like this, go work for the railroad, you know. Hidden system files like DS Store on Mac OS are also generally kept out of the repository. Again, you might be leaking sensitive or important information to the general internet by including hidden files. I'm not actually particularly sure what DS Store does on Mac OS because I don't use Mac OS. Probably nothing good. So, Git classifies all of the files within a repository as follows. You either have tracked, untracked, or brand new, ignored. You have to tell Git to ignore things specifically. It's like include by default, ignore if specified, right? So, if we don't ignore files, Git lets us know about untracked files when we use git status. And if we use git add dot to add all the new files we've created, then we may accidentally add files that we didn't want to be tracked. Yes. Yes. So, how do we do it? We create the git ignore file. The git ignore file, first of all, starts with a dot. The file name does. So what does that mean in Linux/Unix? All of you experts.
Context of where you are.
Oh, no, when the file name begins with a dot. If you have a dot all by itself, that means the current file folder. But if I say something like, I'm glad we're reviewing this. If I say cd dot, that means change directory to the current directory, and is the same thing as saying 1 is equal to 1, right? If I say, cd dot git, I'm moving into the git folder. But this has a special meaning. That's it. That's a hidden file, right? So the file that we are modifying here is .gitignore, and it is a file and not a directory. When you place this file in a folder, it sets up ignore rules for that folder and all subfolders. It's recursive by default. Very good. Any questions so far? So, we put files, directories, and patterns on each line of the text file .gitignore to specify what we want to ignore. The pattern matching actually makes it somewhat sophisticated. We can ignore entire groups of files and directories, etc. You can use the octothorpe character for comments, and this is an example. No thanks. Here you go. Some common gitignore configurations. Compiled source, SO, EXE, DLL, class, and COM. Packages. Ooh, yeah, like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to like repo a zip file, but it is murderous. Like, oh. So, GitHub has a file size limit. It doesn't really, I think, have a repo size limit, but the individual files in a repo can't be bigger than 50 megs. I think it's 50 megs. So, you know, zip files often and easily exceed 50 megs, and like, it is like pulling teeth to try to convince GitHub to like behave after you've accidentally added such a file to a repo that you're trying to push. It's murder. Log files, database files, OS generated files. Trashes is like the trash folder on Linux. Yeah, lots of things. In fact, one of the things that GitHub gives you, when you create a new repo, it allows you to pick from a list of template gitignores, which I highly recommend, because you basically say, this is a Java project. Please include the standard gitignore for Java projects. And it just does. And that's useful, right? Web projects, Node projects, C projects, all that stuff. So, but it's also useful to write your own, because we need to be able to customize it, right? So, the pattern matching that is used has a specific name. It's kind of a funny name. When we write patterns in gitignore files, we are writing glob patterns. We have several slides on some of the common glob patterns, but the thing to understand about glob patterns, this is the same patterning system that you use within the bash terminal to get multiple files out of the file system. Right? So when I say ls star.js in order to list all of the JSON files, right? Or not JSON, all the JavaScript source code files, that's a glob pattern. Glob patterns are actually like pretty darn complicated when you start getting into them. There are lots of operators that you're probably not aware of, but most commonly it's asterisk to represent multiple characters, right? That's the hello world of glob patterns. So, let's get into some of them. I'll start with this guy, right? This is a glob pattern. In a gitignore file, this means ignore anything that ends in a dot, like anything with the .log file extension in this or any subfolder. Right? Because the star here can also represent the folder, the directory separator character. So there you go. Asterisk is wildcard. 2 asterisks. You can prepend a pattern with double asterisk to match directories anywhere in the repository. So basically any folder called logs existing anywhere is caught. So logs, logs Monday, build, logs, debug. All of these are caught by that one pattern. Very, very powerful. Like, should be thought of as a searching tool and not just pattern matching. You can also use double asterisk to match files based on their name and the name of their parent directory. So you can get double asterisk logs/debug.log, which will get, the same, that inside of build, but not logs build debug, right? So basically you can specify, the rest of it needs to look like this. This is actually not too dissimilar from leaving the 1 asterisk off. I think you could get to the same point with it, now that I'm thinking about it. Prepending a slash matches files only in the repository root. So root for a git ignore is relative to the root of the repository, not relative to the root of the operating system, right? So we're talking about a different root. Git is kind of thinking of the repo as being an operating system in that sense, right? Debug.log ignores files with this name throughout the repository. So debug.log, no matter where it occurs, is ignored, no matter what directory it's in. A question mark matches exactly 1 character. So if you have, debug 0, debug G, all of those would match. But because debug 10 exceeds the number of characters here, it no longer works. You can also insert the asterisk anywhere you like. So you could say, debug asterisk.log. That would match everything here, but it would also match things like debug /unintended /poop.log, right? Because this asterisk would expand to all of that optionally, right? It's literally it's the most general. It's the most general pattern. If you want anything, you may need to be more specific than that, right? Square braces with a numeric range allows you to match everything inside the numeric range. Debug 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But of course, once you start exceeding the size of the character limit, so it goes. This is the reason why if you've been working with computers long enough, you tend to get into the habit of doing things like, file 001.png. You'll see a lot of auto-generated stuff do it this way too, right? You'd be like, well, why do I need these, right? And it's like, well, if you expect the number of files to be greater than 100, you should definitely include enough digits in the file name because that makes glob patterning easy, right? And it doesn't cost you anything to include the zeros. Make sense? So far, so good? Square braces match a single character from a specified set. Could be 0 or 1, could be A, B, C, right? This should be feeling a little bit like regular expressions. It's not regular expressions, it doesn't have the full expressive power of regular expressions, but, you know, there are similarities. Not the bang character at the beginning sets this as a not operation, so any characters but these two characters, right? A to Z ranges can be numeric or alphabetic, right? If you don't append a slash, the pattern will match both files and the contents of directories with that name. In the example match on the left, both directories and files named log are logs are ignored. So you have the file logs, you have logs/debug.log, that's a match here. Build/logs, that's a match here. Logs latest foobar, that's a match, that's a match. It ignores all of these. Appending a slash indicates that the pattern is a directory. So this is the same as the above, but you're no longer matching files named that. It must be a directory. That's a general Linux way of indicating this is a directory by putting a slash character on the end of it. So here's an interesting one. We have the folder logs, and we say not logs/important.log. So we want to ignore logs generally, but allow this particular important log, right? This matches logs debug.log and logs important.log. So due to a performance-related quirk in Git, you cannot negate a file that is ignored due to pattern matching on a directory. So you can't, because this is specified at the level of a file, not at the level of directory, the directory overrides it. The directory pattern overrides the individual file pattern. Double asterisks mean you're matching 0 or more directories, so has to start with logs and end with debug.log, but any number of things in the middle can be fine. Wildcards, again, can occur at any point, Monday, Tuesday, but not latest, because it doesn't end in day, right? Patterns specifying a file in a particular directory are relative to the repository root. You can prepend a slash if you like, but it doesn't do anything special. So, logs/debug.log does not catch debug.log at the root of the repo, right? Nor does it catch build/logs/debug. So if you want that one, you put the double asterisk in it. So the general convention is to have just one git ignore file in the root of the directory, or in the root directory of the repo. This is to avoid rules where git ignore files override other git ignore files in complicated ways. It's easier to keep it all in one place and to use patterns properly to target the things you need targeted, rather than, basically we want to avoid unnecessary complication, right? Subdirectories can have git ignore files, and their effect would be as if the subdirectory was the root directory. So root directory to a git ignore file basically means my location. Note that if our files actually have characters, like square braces that are used for pattern matching, we use slash to escape them. So slash square brace would match for square brace. But, if you're using special characters in your file names, I will personally find you, and I will correct your code for you. I will swoop in on a vine, do some commands, and swoop away again. Do not use special characters in your file names or folder names. Nothing that's used for a glob pattern, nothing that's used for a regular expression. Don't even use spaces. Okay? Name your files as if you were naming variables. Right?
Can we use like underscore or dash?
Underscore is fine. Dash is generally fine as well. Space is difficult because space is the argument separator in Bash, right? So it has to be, it just feels wrong to escape a space, but you have to do that if you've included a space in your file name, right? Or your folder name. Now, people who are used to Windows, they just use spaces all the time. Windows itself puts spaces in things all the time. Round braces are generally okay, but certainly avoid square braces. Avoid things like $sign and caret, and definitely avoid asterisk, right? Period is fine. I wouldn't encourage the use of comma. Comma is often also a separator for arguments. When you are as old and have been doing things for as long as me, you get very superstitious about using things that are generally considered separators in anything, in case it has to be parsed by something. You don't the thing you don't want is to SQL injection attack yourself, So I will say that probably the definition of a clean repo is one that has a git ignore file properly configured to the type of project you're doing. In addition to cleaning up any branches that you're not using anymore, and perhaps trying to keep, files of the type that we discussed out of the repo as far as possible. Cleanliness is next to godliness. So, we use git add to add files to the repository and tell Git how to track them. To remove files from the repository and tell Git not to track them, we use git rm. Again, there are you could just delete file and then add the deletion as a change. This does both at the same time. So git rm file.txt deletes file.txt immediately. Puts the change into the staging area. We need to commit for the change to be in the repository. So, very important to know, when you delete a file, you are not deleting it throughout the commit history, right? You are only deleting it in that period of time. You're not affecting the history, the stored history of the repo in any way, right? So, part of the nice thing about Git is that I'm pretty sure it's difficult to impossible to like go back into a commit and modify it. You know? It's like the way that commits are stored in the first place is as file differences, right? So like the commit itself isn't like a stored copy of the file that you can go in and modify. All it is it's like there have been, you know, I added this line, this line, this line, subtracted that line, modified these other ones since the last commit. In order to get the file, you have to step through every commit in the repository to regenerate the file, right? So you can't just step into, say, oh, whoops, I put something rather embarrassing into this commit on this particular day. I could just go in and take it out. You can't. What you need then is a new repository. That one has been permanently contaminated. Set it from public to private, and never speak of it again. Which is why it's also very important to be very careful about what you commit. So, in this example, we are adding a file to the repository, file.txt. We're using touch here. We discussed the touch command, right? Yeah. I explained to you that it can also be used to modify timestamps. I may have mentioned that. So touch is not only used to create files, this is like what it's most commonly used for, but its most useful use is that you can use touch to modify the timestamp of a file. It's actually quite trivial to do, and this is the reason that I do not accept like on-time submission to CS Unix as proof that the thing was done on time, because literally all you have to do is SSH in and change the timestamp on that file and to before the due date, and you know, there's no way for me to know you've done that. So you know, that's not. If you want it considered submitted, it has to be submitted through Canvas, and that's the reason. So git status after, pardon me. So we have git remove file.txt, remove file.txt. If we view the contents of the folder, there's nothing there. Git status, deleted file.txt. That's a staged change. We then commit it commits, and it's still not there. Right? Sound good? Ooh, did I talk about git revert? Okay, that's a very useful one as well. Just, you know. So, this is not very well stated. Basically, if you want to take a single file and like revert it back to the last committed version, git revert does that. So if you're like, you know, ooh, I'm gonna be clever. I'm doing some bash scripting, and I've got this sed pattern that I really, really want to use, and it's like, oh look, it's a global find and replace, and I broke everything. I just broke everything. Then you don't have to worry. It's not broken forever. All you have to do is git revert the files that you broke. It reverts them back to the version that's stored in the repo. And there you go. You have your files back. That's very useful, especially when you're doing like things related to set operations. I'm still in the process of cracking down on people who did that in assignment 3. Man. I'm going to try to get the grading out of the way, caught up for this class this week. Yes. when I'm done these slides, I'll show you what I've been doing. I've been making a cool revision to the assignment 4 for server side. I think you guys will like it, but after class. This won't take that much longer. So you can remove multiple files by specifying multiple files. You can also use wildcards to remove files and directories which match a pattern. What type of pattern is this? It's a glob pattern. Why is it called a glob pattern? I'm so happy you asked. Because it's a program. Long ago in Unix version 6, there was a program, etc. glob, that would expand wildcard patterns. Soon afterwards, this became a shell built in. These days, there is also a library routine, glob, that will perform this function for a user program. There you go. So that's what's doing all of these expansions. We can also use the recursive flag to do subdirectories. I'm sure everybody's used to this by now. Oftentimes, as part of software development, we have a built folder where executables and other compiled artifacts are stored. We virtually never, wait, that seems like this is the wrong, yeah, okay. We virtually never want these files to be tracked by Git, and we may have them specified in gitignore. But they'll still be produced when we build our software, and it would be nice if there was a simple way to get rid of them. Delete them permanently. Git clean removes untracked files from a repository. If we just try git clean, it won't work. We need to use other options. This is to prevent users from accidentally removing files they need. So git clean n is the dry run. It will show you what will be deleted but without actually deleting them. F will actually do it. The F flag is also used for RM, and there it means force. And in RM it means do this and don't complain about it, basically. Suppress any, RM sometimes has this habit. It's like, remove this directory. It's like, well, what about this binary encoded protected file? Yes. What about this binary encoded protected file? Yes. What about this binary encoded protected file? Yes. Just yes to all. There's no yes to all. So, stop it, Control-C, rerun it, use the force flag. That's how you do it. So the F option will actually do the cleaning, remove the files. By default, git clean will ignore untracked directories, but with the D flag, it will become recursive and remove untracked directories, subdirectories, and files. DN is the dry run. DF will actually perform the changes. Generally speaking, check before you delete. Okay? If you attempt git clean, just git clean, you'll get this error. Fatal! Clean.require force defaults to true, and neither I, N, nor F given, refusing to clean. Which is probably actually my favorite error message. I refuse to do what you have asked, user. But if we take a look, we've got these directories that we are creating using make directory and touch. Directory 1, directory 2, bing bang boom, right? If we add directory 1 and commit it, very good, then clean would remove directory 2. That's the dry run. F, removing directory 2. LS, there it is. So in a lot of older ways of doing things, like for example when you have make files and this sort of thing, often in a makefile you'll build a rule in that cleans up all of these kind of files that accumulate and are basically just clutter. This is your Gitty way of doing it. Using the Git repo itself as your, this is what I want to delete, this is what I want to keep. It kind of assumes you're doing things properly, Normally, only files unknown to Git are removed when using git clean, so if a file is in git ignore, it will not be removed. Therefore, if you've selected git ignore on your IDE's configuration files or something like that, it won't blow those out every time you try to clean the repo up. So, if a file, you can use the X option to remove these files as well, if you wish, and you can use the E pattern to exclude files from being removed. If X is not used, these files are excluded in addition to the rules in git ignore. If X is used, these files are excluded, so we could use this as a way to remove files in git ignore except for those specified with E pattern. So if I wanted to say I want to remove everything except .conf files, you say e/star.conf, and then it will exclude configuration files. However, it's a little bit dangerous. I don't recommend doing it that way. You should try not to try not to design the project in such a way that not remembering that you need this flag breaks everything, right? So if you're starting to do stuff like that, this is the point where I recommend putting the code into a bash script, right? This is what bash scripts are for. In fact, much of the time I have bash scripts that are only one or two lines. Why? Because they're very complicated lines and I don't want to have to remember them, right? Even very small bash scripts are very useful. Okie dokie. Miracle of miracles. We're done. We actually did it. We actually made it through. We're on time for the slides, everyone. Okay. So, anybody who at this point wants to hang around to work on the assignment, I will make myself available so long as there are still people in the room. And if you want to do that at home and get the heck out of here, that's also fine by me. I'm going to turn off the recording now. Ooh, and if you want to see the cool thing that I wrote for assignment 4 for server side, stick around for a minute.